Although I have done my research to present this video, it cannot be a source for your academic understanding of the female reproductive system. My only reason to produce this video is to destigmatize certain elements in Indian society that are corroding the lives of millions every day. It is just appalling that there is a need to address the social stigma attached to menstruation in 2019. I believe we can only destigmatize something when people unaffected by the stigma give voice to the truth as loud as the victims do, if not louder. Menstrual cycle is the monthly series of changes a woman's body goes through in preparation for the possibility of pregnancy. The average menstrual cycle lasts 28 days, and when pregnancy doesn't happen, the blood and tissue from the uterus comes out of the vagina, and the process is called menstruation or period. Menarche is the onset of menstruation in young teens, and the average age ranges from 12 to 15 years, and this menstrual cycle continues until the ages 45 to 55 when it stops permanently, which draws a woman's reproductive period to an end with menopause. In between, it only pauses during a pregnancy. First, we'll know a few things about the hormones involved in menstrual cycle. Hormones are chemicals which act as message carriers in our bodies. They control most major bodily functions from basic needs like hunger to complex systems like reproduction and even the emotions and mood. Gonadotropin releasing hormone is a hormone responsible for the release of follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone from the anterior pituitary. Follicle stimulating hormone is essential to pubertal development and the function of ovaries and testes. In women, this hormone stimulates the growth of ovarian follicles in the ovary. A surge in luteinizing hormone levels causes ovulation, which is a process involving tearing of ovarian follicle and the release of a mature egg from the ovary. And it also stimulates the corpus luteum to produce progesterone. Estrogen is responsible for maturation and maintenance of the vagina and uterus, and they are also involved in ovarian functions. They also regulate gonadotropin secretion. Progesterone prepares the body for pregnancy in the event that the released egg is fertilized. And one more hormone we will be talking about is inhibin. It is just function is just to regulate the release of follicle stimulating hormone when it is not necessary, which is during the second phase of the cycle called as luteal phase. Hypothalamus is a part of that brain which is responsible for the body temperature, hunger, moods, and the release of hormones from other glands, and also controls thirst, sleep, and sex drive. Pituitary is considered the master control gland as it controls other endocrine glands and produces the hormones that trigger growth. Hypothalamus controls the hormones released by the anterior pituitary gland by releasing something called as gonadotropin releasing hormone, which results in the production of follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. These hormones leave the pituitary and travel through the bloodstream to the ovaries. This is vagina. It receives the male organ and the ejaculate. These are the ovaries. Their function is to produce eggs for potential fertilization. These are the fallopian tubes. They are the passages through which the egg travels to reach uterus. And these are the follicles. They are just basically developing eggs and supporting cells on the ovaries. And this is uterus. Its function is to house and nourish a fetus until it's ready for birth. This is endometrium. It provides a surface for the implantation of the egg and nurtures it. This is the tissue that is shed and renewed during the menstruation. This is the zoomed in version of the ovary. This ovary in the anti-clockwise direction represents the development of follicles into an egg and into corpus luteum chronologically in 28 days, with gonadotropin releasing hormone acting on follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. They travel through bloodstream to reach ovaries, and with the induction of follicle stimulating hormone, of many primordial follicles are mature into primary follicles and subsequently to secondary follicles. but only one ovulates and produces an egg which will later be released during ovulation. The whole of menstrual cycle can be divided into two phases. The first one being follicular phase, during which we can see the development of follicles and the development of an egg and the process of ovulation at the end of the follicular phase. And the second one being the luteal phase, during which the remnant of the ovarian follicle will be developed into corpus luteum, which will start releasing hormones like estrogen, progesterone, and inhibin. At the start of the cycle, gonadotropin releasing hormone levels rise constantly, and with that, there is a rise and steady decrease in follicle stimulating hormone levels and a steady level of luteinizing hormone. During maturation, the secondary follicles produce low concentrations of estrogen, which will have a negative feedback effect on the follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone until about the 10th day of the cycle. This fall of follicle stimulating hormone is due to the fact that the rise in estrogen. When the follicle stimulating hormone levels fall due to the negative feedback of the estrogen, the large tertiary follicles die due to the lack of follicle stimulating hormone, which helped them grow and survive till then. After about 10 days, typically the one dominant follicle which remains after follicle stimulating hormone deprivation releases more estrogen than all the developing follicles did together before the negative feedback. This rise in estrogen, meanwhile, will thicken the endometrium in the uterus, and during this phase, the consistency of the cervical mucus is changed to make it more hospitable to the incoming sperm. The dominant follicle produces so much estrogen that instead of negative feedback, these extremely high concentrations of estrogen trigger a positive feedback to release luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone into the bloodstream again. With this increase in estrogen rises the gonadotropin releasing hormone due to the positive feedback, and so does LH and FSH. With this large burst of luteinizing hormone, also called as LH surge, the dominant follicle matures and releases the oocyte, which is also known as egg, and this whole process is called ovulation. In a typical 28-day menstrual cycle, ovulation occurs on the day 14th. Ovulation marks the end of follicular phase and the start of luteal phase. The egg which is released will travel through the fallopian tubes to enter and will be planted in the uterus till a potential fertilization occurs. Due to the lack of estrogen released by the dominant follicle, the levels of estrogen drop, and so does gonadotropin releasing hormone and LH and FSH. The levels of inhibin and progesterone till this phase are not significant. After ovulation, what remains of the ovarian follicle starts developing into a corpus luteum, which, when fully developed, keeps on releasing estrogen, progesterone, and inhibin until it degenerates into a corpus albicin. Albuquin. I don't know how to pronounce that. Inhibin, which is released, will regulate the production of follicle stimulating hormone as it is not needed in the luteal phase, and progesterone tries to control the release of gonadotropin releasing hormone. At this point in the cycle, progesterone levels are higher than estrogen levels, resulting in the fall of gonadotropin releasing hormone and subsequently the pituitary hormones. Progesterone and estrogen signal that ovulation has occurred and they stimulate the growth of endometrium. As the corpus luteum degenerates, the levels of our ovarian hormones fall, and with the lack of negative feedback from inhibin and progesterone, gonadotropin releasing hormone will start the production of follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone, facilitating in the start of another menstrual cycle. So the degenerated corpus luteum will facilitate the growth of new follicles in the ovaries, and due to the lack of progesterone and estrogen, endometrium cannot be maintained and has to be shed, which is known as the period.